I never believed this, and I'm probably going to catch some heat for saying it, but coughing or sneezing into your elbow has never made much sense to me compared with covering your mouth with your hands or a tissue. Because you can wash your hands, you can use hand sanitizer, but seriously, when's the last time you actually washed your elbow after you coughed or sneezed? I know there are some strong opinions out there, so before you push back on this, indulge me. I went and looked at the actual data, and I ended up going down a bit of a rabbit hole, and I found not one, but two very different types of studies on this. I'll put the links to both down in the description below if you want to read them yourself. But one study looks at the physics of coughing, what actually comes out of your mouth when you cough. And the other study looks at human behavior, what people are actually willing to do. And when you put those two things together, you get a very different picture of what most of us have been led to believe. Let's start with the first one. This study had people cough, and they actually measured droplets using a laser system in real time. Not a simulation, not a model, real people coughing, and measuring what was actually emitted from their mouths. They tested coughing into the hands, into tissues, into the elbow, even into surgical masks. And here's what they found. None of them, none at all, stopped the spread of droplets, not even close. Now, that doesn't mean they don't do anything, but it does mean they don't come anywhere close to fully blocking what's being expelled from the human respiratory system. And here's the bigger issue. Most of what comes out when you cough aren't the big droplets that you can see. It's mostly microscopic particles, tiny, often less than 1 micron, which can stay suspended in the air and inhaled by others around you. So even if you do everything right, whatever right really means, a lot of that aerosol still escapes. That's just the physics of coughing. And interestingly, there's even newer research trying to figure out if there's a better way to do this altogether. One small pilot study looked at something you might not have even thought about, coughing into your shirt. And in that study, that approach actually reduced the spread of the cough plume more than coughing into the elbow, even approaching what you might see with a mask. But, and this is very important, this was a very small study, only a handful of participants, lab conditions, not strong enough to change recommendations, so I wouldn't start thinking that this is the answer either. What it really shows is this: we're still trying to figure out what actually works. Now, let's come back to the original argument, hands versus elbows. If you cough into your hands, you can wash them. If you cough into your elbow, that contamination stays there. And both of those things are true, but think about that. If you're flying from Texas to Las Vegas, sitting right next to Ann, the elbow cougher, who happens to also have bronchitis and the flu. But that's not really fair either, because whether she coughs into her hands or her elbow, the fact that she's on the plane to begin with, you and many other passengers probably aren't walking away unscathed. Because this study highlights something more important. The real issue isn't your hands or your elbow. It's what never gets stopped in the first place. When you cough into your elbow, you're not sealing anything off. You're just redirecting airflow, usually downward, sometimes outward. But those tiny particles, they're still escaping into the environment. Same thing with hands, same thing with tissues. So if none of these things are perfect, why do we keep telling people to cough into their elbow? And this is where the second paper comes in, because this one has nothing to do with physics and everything to do with human behavior. Researchers looked at how people respond to messaging like cough into your elbow, stay at home when you're sick. And what they found isn't rocket science. What they found was people are much more likely to do what's easy more often than what's effective. In other words, coughing into your elbow, the messaging has been out there for years. It's simple, it doesn't disrupt your day, it doesn't cost you anything, but staying home when you're sick, that's inconvenient. That affects your work, your schedule, your paycheck, your responsibilities, and consequently, compliance with that drops a lot. So now we're looking at this differently. It's not just about what works best scientifically, it's about what people will actually do. But there's also another layer to this as well, because you might think, well, if we just educate people more. But this study showed something else. More messaging doesn't necessarily increase compliance either. At some point, people just start to tune out. So now, step back and think about this. We've been taught to cough into our elbow, not because it's perfect, but because it's simple, low effort, easy to remember, easy to do in the moment. And because of that, people are actually more likely to do it. So yes, there are flaws in the elbow recommendation. And my instinct about the elbow versus the hands isn't wrong. And if you're an elbow advocate, neither is yours. But the nuance here matters. It's not that the elbow is better. It's not. It's that it's more likely to actually happen. Period. And in public health, that matters because a recommendation that's followed imperfectly by a lot of people can sometimes have more impact than a better recommendation that almost no one follows. So when you put all of this together, here's what we know. The physics study tells us these barriers, no matter what they are, don't stop transmission very well. The behavioral study tells us people follow advice that tends not to disrupt their lives. And even newer research suggests we likely haven't fully figured out the best method at all yet. Which brings us to the real conclusion about this. Cough etiquette isn't about perfection. It's about attempting to reduce risk in a way people will actually comply with. So whether you're in the elbow camp or you prefer using your hands and washing them after the fact, there's probably a bigger takeaway to pay attention to. If you're truly sick, the most important decision isn't how you cough or where you deliver the contents of that cough or sneeze. It's whether you should be around people at all, because that's where the biggest impact actually lies. And it's especially important as we age, as immune function declines, most notably in our 60s and beyond. So next time you're truly sick, running fever, coughing and sneezing beyond your control, give some serious thought as to whether your friends, your family, co-workers, or a busload or plane full of people want to inherit what you're carrying. And do the right thing. Stay home, tuck in, get some chicken soup, put on your favorite show, get some rest until you're better. YouTube thinks you should watch this video next. Thanks so much for watching, and if you want to keep this conversation going, please share this with someone you feel would benefit from watching it as well. All the best to you, and I will see you in the next video.